that we will be having an entire day of joint sessions on these three very important topics. But I must admit that when we started to hear about the way that we would organize today's sessions, I was a little bit overwhelmed, because to hear about joint sessions on gender, youth, and Indigenous knowledge are three topics that deserve a whole day amongst themselves, let alone to have all together and across three different organizations. But as we've organized the sessions today with the three organizations and across these three different topics, I've come to realize that it doesn't make sense to tackle these topics together. It doesn't just make sense to tackle these topics together, it's essential. These three communities, our youth, our women, and our Indigenous communities, all represent marginalized voices who have long been outside of the climate community and the climate justice conversation. So climate justice, gender equity, and the integration of traditional knowledge are all deeply interconnected. And we hope today across these sessions to show you all and our audience just how much they're interconnected and how we must address them together. These three communities, our women, our youth, and our Indigenous peoples, have long faced systemic barriers that exclude them from climate decision making, despite being disproportionately impacted by the impacts of climate change. So I'd just like to share with you a couple statistics before we get started to lay the groundwork for the day. And in fact, I'm going to ask you in the audience if you know these statistics, because they're pretty common ones, and I hope you do. So women and children are disproportionately impacted by climate change. We know that. But just how much? So in a disaster, women and children are how many more times likely to be injured or killed in a disaster, do you think? 2 times more likely? 3 times more likely? Does anybody have an idea? It's actually 14 times more likely. Women and children are 14 times more likely to die in a disaster than a man. That's incredible. That's absolutely astounding, and a statistic that shows their increased vulnerability in 2024. A similar statistic that should equally scare you is that 1 billion children today are at extremely high risk of the impacts of climate change. 1 billion. That's half of all children. So today we really hope to inspire you to see just how much we need to change these stories, how we can change these impacts and help these very vulnerable communities become much more prepared to face disasters and to speak and be involved in our sessions, in our communities, and particularly in our climate science. So I'm just going to walk us through a couple of the sessions that we'll have today, because it's quite a packed agenda. We're going to start our morning off in just a couple of minutes with the Mary session on ancestral skills and climate change. And I'm really looking forward to hearing this session, as it will address how cultural heritage and ancestral knowledge can be brought more into the climate conversation and help us understand how to better mitigate and adapt to climate change. They'll launch a book on ancestral stories and climate change, which I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about, which will set the stage for the discussions throughout the course of the day. Following their session, we'll have another from IPCC on gender, youth, and Indigenous knowledge in the IPCC context, hearing the findings from a number of different IPCC reports, and hearing a little bit about what IPCC is doing institutionally to better involve these three communities. From there, our sessions will become a little bit more youth and solutions oriented. We'll begin to have a session on mental health, looking specifically at children and youth in the ways in which they are thinking and feeling about climate science, and looking at how we can transform anxiety into action. From there, we'll go into a session on communication, storytelling, and creativity that will look at how we can better communicate climate science and better bring in traditional knowledge into our stories and our climate solutions. And finally, our sessions today will end with the session that I'm most looking forward to, which is our intergenerational dialogue. We'll have leaders from WMO, IPCC, and the Mary Foundation all talking about how we can better involve youth and Indigenous knowledge, how we can better integrate gender equity, and bring in all three of these communities, not just in a token way and not just representationally, but really to bring them into the conversation in a meaningful way. So I hope that you're able to stick around with us today in these sessions, or that you're able to sort of come in and out. We'll be really looking forward to bringing in you as our audience members into the discussions, because it's not just about our panelists and our experts, but it's also about hearing from you, our audience, and what you think and how we could be doing better. So I'll just close with a reminder that the challenges that we're facing today with these marginalized communities are very interconnected, and so must be the solutions. We need to create intergenerational and intersectional partnerships all together that prioritize equity and amplify these marginalized voices. We need to change the stories we are telling to be more inclusive, more creative, and more engaging. And more than anything, we need to elevate our marginalized voices, whether it's young women, and young leaders or indigenous holders. We are needing to unlock our innovation, our diverse perspectives, and in order to have our collective response to the climate crisis. So I thank you all for being here, and I'd like to just turn over the last word to Abdallah, the Secretary of the IPCC, to give us his opening remarks. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Clara. I think it was a sort of invitation last minute, because we were discussing yesterday about the opening and so on. But I'm really proud because first for you, because I think you are coming from WMO, our parent organization, and also you are representing all what we are going to discuss today. But I am really, I was really accept this invitation because we are working with Mary Foundation, with WMO, and IPCC. And I think this is an excellent demonstration of the collaboration. I will be short because the process of this day is also about what share vision, IPCC share vision, which is exactly in the heart of what we are discussing today. I will bring, we are speaking about CO2. Now I am coming with the formula, which is RE2. What it means, R, E, I. R for relevance, I for inclusiveness, and another I for interdisciplinarity. RE2. I hope it will be really something we can remember. But R is for relevance. And I want to put this in context. The relevance is our work should be really something that brings quality. And let me say that the collaboration is there to bring quality. Something that we cannot do, the foundation philanthropy can do it. And this improved relevance. And also, what is expected is timely information. And something, it is about time, about celerity. And also the collaboration with the philanthropy for parent organization is a guardian for such timely products and useful products. Inclusiveness. And this is something really, just look into the room now, we can feel already that inclusiveness is there. I think, and this is what it means by including indigenous local knowledge, indigenous people, and Miri Foundation Philanthropy are also doing an excellent job in this area. And also, inclusiveness about gender. And so this is something will be discussed, and it is under also the chair vision. And also not only participation, it's also about the quality of the participation. Sometimes you can have a huge number of participants, but no quality. But sometimes you can have a few number of participants, but quality is high. I am looking here, the people here are bringing good quality, including myself. I am modest. Well, I know some people bringing good quality. Now, what is really important, and this is the last I, is interdisciplinarity. I want to insist interdisciplinarity. No one can say that he knows everything. No one can say that he's able to cover all the discipline. I think it is distributed manner, distributed system. What you are doing, you are excelled in what you are doing. I am doing something, I am excellent, you are doing something. With this interdisciplinarity, it is about the mathematics, not 1 + 1 is equal 2, but 1 + 1, mainly in this pavilion, it equals a billion. I am exaggerating, of course. So anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity. I am really proud to work with you, and it will be something which is really honor me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdallah, for those remarks and for being willing to join us at the last minute. And I'd now like to give the floor to Patricia from the Mary Foundation to open the first session. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you, Claire. So, hi everyone, I'm Patricia, CEO of Philanthropy Cortesolari Mary Foundation. We are very proud to be here in this special day where we are organizing a lot of joint events. And as Claire said, we are going to start with the first joint event about ancestral skills and climate change, learning from our ancestors. First of all, I wish to invite on the podium the different panelists, the brilliant panelists that we are going to have this morning with us. First of all, Mr. Ramon Pich Madruga, IPCC Vice Chair. Can you come to the podium, please? François Gélineau, Vice Rector for International Affairs, Sustainability, Development and Philanthropy from University of Laval. Then, I don't know if we have or not Daniela Diaz, Ricardo. Could you tell us if we have Daniela Diaz? Then could we have Rosa Ramos, please? If you can come to the podium, and Betsabeth Martinez Gutierrez. I don't know if Betsabeth is coming or not. And Solange. I don't have you here, but please, if you are in this panel, you are absolutely welcome, yes. So it's a really pleasure to have all of you here. I'm going to start in giving a few words about the importance of this. So as you know, this event looks to present and highlight the role of indigenous and local knowledge in accelerating climate change solutions, because conservation and the fight against the triple crisis require that the cultural dimension be addressed alongside the environmental, social, economic, and institutional dimensions. Ancestral culture are a unique source of knowledge for the conservation of our biodiversity and the climate change mitigation, especially the oceans. And coastal societies have developed unique traditions and ways of life closely linked to the sea, which have influenced trade, exportation, exploration, and conservation. Cultural heritage not only enrich our understanding of the past, but also contribute to the development of identity and knowledge about the nature-based solutions for the climate change mitigation. So the objective of this high-level roundtable is bring together representatives from different sectors, from the public, private, and civil society, to discuss the importance of cultural heritage and ancestral knowledge in climate change mitigation and adaptation policy. And this panel will coincide with the launch of Relatos Ancestrales y Cambio Climático, in English, Ancestral Stories in Climate Change, a book of ancestral wisdom from South America on indigenous people in climate change, that was led by Philanthropia Cortesolari, and that we will be launched today during this panel. So I'm going to start by giving the floor to Ramon Pich Madruga. Ramon is serves as vice chair of the EPCC. He has been director of the Center for World Economy Studies in Cuba since 2013. He is also an associate professor of the Faculty of Economics at the University of Havana. Moreover, he has been a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Inter-American Institute for Research on Global Change from 2007 to 2013, and a member of the Academy of Science of Cuba since 2012. Ramon, you are always very welcome. Thank you to be here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And firstly, I would like to thank Mary Foundation, the World Meteorological Organization, and the IPCC for firstly organizing this event on this crucial issue, but also for inviting me to share in this panel of distinguished experts in this morning. I could say that indigenous peoples and indigenous knowledge is crucial for understanding the interrelationships between these crucial relevant issues that has been already mentioned as part of the so-called Rio Trio conventions dealing with climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation, desertification and land degradation. They are in the core of these interrelationships, and this knowledge, indigenous people's knowledge, is crucial for also as part of different instruments and different vision for in looking for solutions to this combined challenge for humanity. I mean climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. I'm going to refer in this intervention because I'm also participating in the second segment of this big event dealing much more with climate change and the IPCC findings with regard to this issue. In this case, I'm going to refer more to the contribution of these indigenous people's knowledge in the looking for solutions for biodiversity loss. And in that sense, I would like to start by saying that firstly, the context-specific perspective of this knowledge, I mean the context-specific perspective is typical of indigenous and local knowledge system, where knowledge production does not typically seek to explicitly extend or validate itself beyond their specific geographic and cultural context. So this is one aspect that I wanted to emphasize. Also, that nature managed by indigenous and local community is under increasing pressure at the moment. According to the global report by IPBES, at least a quarter of the global land area is traditionally owned, managed, used, and occupied by indigenous people. And according to this report, also among the local indicators developed and used by indigenous peoples and the local community, 72% show negative trends in nature that affect, of course, their livelihood and well-being. Also, has been assessed that nature managed by indigenous peoples and local community, as I said, is under growing pressure. These two growing resource extraction, commodity production, mining, and transport, energy infrastructure, with, of course, adverse consequences in many cases for local livelihood and their health. Nature for indigenous peoples is life, is food, is medicines, is health, is energy. I mean, they are closely interconnected, and they are, of course, part of this integrative approach that we are following, or the IPCC and IPBES are followed in their respective integrative assessment process. Areas of the well projected to experience significant negative effects from global challenges, including the climate, biodiversity, and land degradation in general, are also home to large concentration of indigenous peoples and many of the world's poorest community. So what has been said in terms of these communities being disproportionately affected, not only by climate change, but also by other global challenges, is an important point that should be stressed as part of the solution, equitable solution, just transition, inclusion, that should be part of the agenda when talking in general on not only of indigenous people, but in general of the participatory approach that governance should take in dealing with all these global challenges. It is important to call the attention that regional and global scenarios lack an explicit consideration of the views, perspective, and rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And this is something that should be further developed. This is also a finding of the global assessment by IPBES. And so it is important also to promote education, knowledge generation, and the acknowledgement and of the different knowledge system, including, of course, this knowledge of indigenous people. Recognizing the knowledge, innovation, practices, institutions, and values of indigenous peoples and local communities is crucial for ensuring their inclusion and participation in this in environmental governance. And also the positive contributions of indigenous peoples and local communities to sustainability can be facilitated through national recognition of their rights. Their lands are often important areas for in situ conservation with regard to biodiversity. And another, just to conclude, with regard of some of the ingredients that should be taken into account when dealing with this when dealing with this aspect is that indigenous and local knowledge systems are locally based, but very relevant at the global level. They often manage their lands and coastal area based on culturally specific world views, their cultural specific world views, applying principles and indicators such as the health of the land, caring of the country, and reciprocal responsibility. In conclusion, some aspects that are taken care of as part of this assessment in the case of IPBES has to do with the need of enabling the inclusion and participations of these communities, improving collaboration, recognizing the different types of knowledge, promoting the use of biodiversity-friendly management practices, promoting and strengthening community-based management and governance, and developing robust and inclusive decision-making process. As I already said at the very beginning, I have based this first intervention dealing specifically with one of the global assessments, which is not, in this case, the IPCC assessment. I'm going to refer to the IPCC assessment later as part of the second segment, but in this case, IPBES, which is similar to the IPCC, but in the context of biodiversity, has been exploring, and I could say that has been more proactive up to now in dealing with the indigenous and local knowledge issues. IPBES has a targeted task force dealing with this aspect, and also has been including additional provision with regard to the assessment of this form of knowledge in the second global assessment that is at the moment under preparation. For the IPCC, as we will see later, we are in a process of improving this. We have been incorporated already this assessment in the working group 2 and 3, but still we are in an emerging process, in my view, of going further in that direction, and we are exploring the best way to do that in correspondence to the second letter that you mentioned, Bella, when talking, inclusiveness, how to be much more inclusive also of the various forms of knowledge into the context of the IPCC assessment. With this, I would like to conclude for now, and let's see, we can elaborate a little bit more on that later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramon, to point out the importance of include the ancestral knowledge and all the improvement that you have done from the IPCC and the conscience to go forward in that sense. I would like to give the welcome to Betsabe Martinez Gutierrez, who just joined us, so please have a seat. And together with that, I'm going to give the floor to Solange Bandiaki Banji, who is the president and coordinator of the Rights and Resources Initiative, a global coalition of over 200 organizations advancing the right of indigenous people, local communities, and Afro-descendant people. Solange was previously led Everrise strategies in Africa and spearheaded Everrise Gender Justice Program. Before the Rights and Resources Initiative, she was with Partner Global, where she led programs on access to justice and peace building. She has also worked as a regional expert on gender and climate change for the African Adaptation Program and the UNDP Gender Team. Solange holds a Master in Environment and Philosophy at Cheikh Anta Diop University, Senegal, and a PhD of Women and Gender Studies from Clark University, USA. Solange, bienvenue. Merci.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And this is a great topic to address at COP29. And for my intervention, I would like to focus on a category of actors that we generally don't talk about, which is the Afro-descendant peoples in Latin America. And as the moderator rightly said, RRI is a global coalition, and we work with indigenous people, local communities, and Afro-descendant across the world, mainly in the global south, in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And why are we talking about the Afro-descendant people at this COP? First, it is important to know that the Afro-descendant people in Latin America and the Caribbean represent 21% of the population, around 134 million, so which is really huge. But for those of you who have been at COP16 in Cali, you would know that at least for the first time, the CBD has recognized the Afro-descendant people as a category of actor important to keep in mind when it comes to biodiversity conservation. So we're hoping also that UNFCCC would at some point get to that. And for the sake of this conversation also, I'll focus on the Afro-descendant women. And as we know, indigenous people, Afro-descendant and local community women, they play a multiple and unique role when it comes to climate change mitigation and adaptation, but also when it comes to reduction of carbon emission. They can vary from forest-based labor, involvement in agriculture, biomass energy, and so on. And this knowledge pretty much is linked to their livelihoods, but also to their rights to land and resources. And as we know, when their rights are not recognized, it will be very difficult for women to take care of the planet. And the Afro-descendant, as we know, also they came from Africa, and it has been more than 500 years that they have been, and they have transferred or carried with them their ancestral knowledge. And that's actually what they have been using when it comes to biodiversity conservation and climate change mitigation. And here I would like to use two concrete examples of some of our collaborators in Colombia and Honduras, and sharing with you what they have been doing and what it means when it comes to cultural heritage and knowledge around climate change. In Colombia, the Association of Afro-Descendant Women of Northern Cauca, called ASOM, has for 20 years brought together more than 200 women who work to transmit ancestral knowledge to new generations and implement practices that contribute to reducing biodiversity loss, mitigating the effect of climate change. And RRI, in collaboration with ASOM, has established and managed 15 community conservation areas in 7 Black community councils in the Choco region. And these efforts include the recovery of ancestral knowledge in agriculture and medicine, the protection of water sources, the restoration of degraded areas, and the transmission of knowledge to new generations through families and schools. Another concrete example is in Honduras. The organization de Desarrollo Étnico Comunitario Territorial, ODECO, with the support of RRI, work with the Garifuna women of all ages to conserve and restore the wetlands and mangrove of the Laguna de Zambuco Biosphere Reserve, which is a Ramsar site of global importance. This project also promotes awareness of the value of the wetland among children and youth and involve both their homes and their schools. These are just two concrete examples, but you would agree with me there are so many, many examples in the indigenous communities, in local communities like this one, on how women contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation. But also, we know that they do face many challenges and around, at all levels when it comes to participation and representation. But one of the key challenges I would like to share today is direct access to finance. They have been contributing, but we know that women have not been having access directly to climate change funding. So how do we change that? And to me, this is really a call to action for a gender-inclusive climate finance, because if we want women to keep on having their role around as land managers, food providers, and leaders in rural enterprise, we need to make sure that climate funding goes directly to supporting these women's organizations, being indigenous women, local community women, or Afro-descendant women. And thank you. So this is what I wanted to share, and a call to action for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Solange, to put the finger on something that very few talk about, the Afro-descendants in Latin America and in the Caribbean. We always talk about the difficulties to be a woman in our regions, and obviously Betsabe could talk about this, but it's probably worse when we are Afro-descendants. So thank you for deep dive. Now we're going to give the floor to Francisca Cortés Solari, who is the executive president of Philanthropy Cortés Solari. She's an entrepreneur, environmentalist, and philanthropist who has dedicated her life to integral and sustainable development initiatives in Chile and around the world. She has an extensive personal and family background in the world of design and retail. In 2002, she founded Philanthropia Cortés Solari, a philanthropic project that promotes integral and sustainable development through integral education, climate change mitigation, and biodiversity conservation. She has been an outstanding promoter of climate change mitigation and biodiversity conservation in Latin America through scientific research, environmental education, and outreach projects developed by the Mary Foundation, part of Philanthropy Cortés Solari. She is also the new member of USAID's 15 Patriots of Nature that bring together the world's leading conservation leader to mobilize resources and technical capacity and strengthen USAID's management and vision for conservation. Francisca, we give you the floor. You're very welcome.
Muchas gracias, Patricia. Bueno, comentarles que yo no estaba dentro del panel.
Patricia.
La que iba a estar en el panel era Dani Díaz, pero tuvo un problema. Dani Díaz fue la encargada de poder, la antropóloga que aglutinó en el fondo el proyecto que ella iba a presentar y que vamos a presentar ahora. Nosotros hace 22 años que venimos trabajando en un territorio, trabajamos en 3 territorios en Chile, pero hace 22 años que trabajamos en un territorio en el norte donde nos encontramos con comunidades indígenas muy arraigadas y con muchas tradiciones, por lo tanto con una cultura y una comunidad indígena bien consolidada. De hecho, acá al lado tengo a mi amiga hermana de San Pedro de Atacama, de donde hicimos este proyecto. Como les digo,
Francisca.
I'm going to translate because we have a problem with the translations. Hay un problema con la traducción. Hay un problema con la traducción, así que voy a seguir yo. So I'm going to continue the translation. Okay, go on. So Francisca was saying that she has been working for many years in the territory, and she was introducing also Rosa, her friends who belong to that territory. Go on, please. Sigue, sí.
Bueno, hoy en día, nosotros lo primero que hicimos cuando llegamos a San Pedro de Atacama, a este lugar, fue obviamente trabajar sobre el territorio, mirando el territorio y haciendo todas las dinámicas territoriales. Entendimos que uno de los principales objetos de conservación, que a mí la palabra objeto de conservación no me gusta mucho, pero es la palabra usada, uno de los objetos de conservación justamente eran los pueblos originarios del territorio. No hablábamos de ningún animal como en las otras latitudes. En esta latitud 22 hablamos de que necesitábamos como resguardar y enfocarnos en que su cultura permaneciera. De ahí con Dani Díaz venimos trabajando ya hace, 20 años con diferentes proyectos, pero el último proyecto que les voy a presentar, no sé si me podrían pasar los libros que están atrás.
Maybe you could pass the books that are in the back.
Los libros.
The books.
Entonces, ¿qué fue lo que nosotros entendimos? Que lo primero que teníamos que hacer en el territorio, primero que nada, era ver cómo rescatar lo inmaterial que tiene que ver con el conocimiento y la sabiduría ancestral, que hablamos como de el origen. ¿Ya? ¿Cuáles son sus tradiciones? ¿Cuáles son sus oficios? ¿Cuál es su cultura? ¿Cuáles son sus ritos? Veíamos que los abuelos, habían algunos que ya estaban muy avanzados en edad y que si ellos se iban, en el fondo nos íbamos a quedar sin la información, que es una información trascendente, yo creo que para el mundo. Y de ahí nace esta segunda colección. La primera colección fue una colección de oficios, donde nos demoramos también 3, 4 años por lo menos en sacar los 14 libros, y ahora sacamos este nuevo libro que para mí es una joya. Hablamos de saberes ancestrales y cambio climático. El año pasado ya presentamos el primer libro con la idea de decir, bueno, vamos a llegar a la segunda COP, pero con todos los libros ya hechos. Hablamos de que está relacionado absolutamente con el cambio climático y los pueblos originarios y la sabiduría ancestral de la agricultura, del manejo del agua, de la semilla, de los ritos que hacen en cuanto a la agricultura. Pensamos que era muy importante sacar esta colección de libros neteada en el fondo con el cambio climático y los pueblos originarios, porque si nos proyectamos tal vez hacia 30 años, 40 años, 50 años, me imagino que tal vez en algún momento, así como vamos, tendremos que sobrevivir en algunas regiones. Entonces, para nosotros esto es como la Biblia de la sobrevivencia, por lo menos de nuestro país. Pero esto debería ser igual un legado para el mundo, porque hay mucha información y obviamente se van juntando también con otros intereses también, no solamente de los indígenas del sur, sino también del norte, del este, del oeste. Al final, los pueblos originarios tienen cosas que son muy comunes, y eso es lo bonito que yo encontré cuando me metí a trabajar en las comunidades. Sentí de que habían formas, ritos, altares, conocimientos ancestrales, de un respeto a la naturaleza, de un respeto cuando se va a sacrificar un animal, un respeto cuando se va a plantar la semilla. Siempre hablan de las mingas en los ríos, siempre hay trabajos comunitarios que son muy hermosos y que hemos reunido en estos libros. El trabajo se demoró 3 años. Me hubiera encantado que Dani Díaz, como les comento, hubiera presentado, porque ella tuvo el trabajo con la comunidad netamente. Creo que lo más importante es la relación con las comunidades, y lo más importante para nosotros fue de que esas personas confiaron en nosotros. Fue complejo porque había como una disociación, en el sentido de que tenían un poco miedo de poner esto en el mundo, y estaban en esa disociación de entregar este conocimiento, pero por otro lado entendieron que era importante entregarlo. Por lo tanto, le agradezco a todas las personas que participaron en esto, que son de pueblos originarios, y no solamente, sino que la producción, los videos, todo lo tratamos de hacer con la comunidad. Es decir, el proyecto es un proyecto comunitario completo, circular. Así que, bueno, voy a dejar estos libros después aquí para que cada uno pueda retirar. Tenemos 2 packs de estos, cada uno se puede llevar un libro para que puedan ver la calidad de lo que hay adentro, y que ojalá que puedan transmitirlo al mundo, llevar este conocimiento al mundo, porque este es un conocimiento que es transversal en el mundo. Entonces, bueno, con eso me quedo. Ojalá que puedan llevar este conocimiento, aunque sea un libro a algún lugar, y cualquier cosa nosotros tenemos la disposición de poder hacerles llegar. También tenemos libros en inglés, el pack lo tenemos en inglés y lo tenemos en español, y nos interesa que lleguen a buenos lugares, que lleguen a los lugares donde se necesita, a las universidades, a los colegios. Obviamente nuestro desafío es que entre en el currículum de educación en Chile. eso
of
sería
Chilo's
nuestro
education.
sueño.
That would be
Así
our
que
dream.
bueno, con eso me quedo
So
con
I
los
will
sueños,
end
me
here.
quedo también
I
con la importancia
also want to
de hacer proyectos que
pinpoint
sean
the relevance of making
concretos
projects that are specific.
y me quedo con esto, con lo concreto y con el tesoro que
And
hay
with the
dentro
treasure
de este material.
that is
Muchas
in this
gracias.
material. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Francisca, for this beautiful. People that were around you knows that it is a huge effort that you have done to bring this culture here to this COP. And now I'm going to take this opportunity to give the floor to Rosa Ramos. Rosa is a member of the Indigenous League and Anti-Culture. She grew up in a community of 15 families in Machuca, an Atacameño town on the route to the Tacto Geysers. She's an expert in sustainable and territorial development. She has worked for years in the Atacama region, including the Puriveter Elemental Reserve that belong to Philanthropy Cortés Solari. Rosa, it's really a pleasure to have you here.
Aló, aló.
Hello, hello.
Sensak,
can you hear
sensak,
me?
kayajia kapin. Esa es mi lengua, Kunza,
I just spoke in
y
my
les saludo
language.
con un muy buen día, un buen
The
sol.
greetings to say.
Yo vengo de donde está esa montaña,
I come
ahí
from
es
where
el
the
volcán
mountain is,
Licancabur, que
Licancabur,
tiene cerca de 6.000
which
metros de
has
altura
around 6,000
y tiene una gran laguna en
and
su
it also
cumbre
has
de color
a big
turquesa.
lagoon
Y ahí llegamos
of a
caminando
turquoise color,
hacia la
and then
montaña
we arrived
para honrar
walking
el
towards
solsticio
the
de
mountain
verano, que
to
para
honor
nosotros es pronto, el
the
21
summer
de diciembre.
solstice, which is
Somos
in December.
un pueblo de los
We
Andes
are
muy conocido y
from the
reconocido,
Andes, very well known.
y agradecer mucho por introducirnos en
Really
cuán
thankful
importantes son los pueblos indígenas en este
for this
tiempo
opportunity to
del cambio
recognize
climático.
indigenous people in these times of climate change.
Nosotros como territorio en el desierto
As territory in the
somos
desert,
también
we
laboratorios
are
naturales,
also natural laboratories,
somos parte de la
We
conservación para el mundo.
part of the conservation of the world.
Nuestra genética en la alimentación,
Our
por ejemplo,
genetics and
que es
eating, for example, is
auténtica, nuestros maíces, nuestras papas,
corn
que se
or
cultivan en lugares
potatoes
muy extremos,
are
de mucha
grown in
aridez,
extreme places,
degradación,
places which are
de
very dry.
tierras muy saladas. Entonces
have
es
very
complejo
strong
buscar
cultures.
el alimento en nuestra
So
tierra.
it's complex to look
Entonces
for
agradecemos
environments.
también
So we
a
really thank
personas como Francisca
to people
que
like
ponen
Francisca,
de su corazón, de su
who
interés,
who put their hearts into
para
this
poder
interest to be able
compartir al mundo lo que
to-
nosotros queremos que se
to
conserve
enter
y
or
se
give
pueda
the world. We
también
want to achieve conservation.
¿Se está traduciendo, Pati? Sí, ya.
Is
que
this
se
being
pueda también
And we
enseñar.
also want to
Nosotros los pueblos indígenas a nivel mundial, cerca del 70% de la alimentación que se produce para el mundo están en tierras indígenas. Conservamos el 80% de la biodiversidad y somos aproximadamente el 5% de la población. Por tanto, es muy importante que existan instancias y recursos para que nosotros podamos difundir lo que queremos dejar también para las futuras generaciones. Y en estos libros principalmente, gracias nuevamente por ponerlo, sí, también existen muchas personas de los territorios que hoy en día queremos compartir nuestra experiencia, nuestros saberes, nuestra cosmovisión nuestra forma de ver la vida, nuestra relación que tenemos con la tierra y el cielo, porque nosotros estamos en el centro y hacemos que esto de alguna manera fluya para la humanidad. Y aparezco también en uno de los libros donde hablo por todas mis relaciones, porque el hombre o la persona indígena no mira solamente el ser humano como lo más importante de la tierra o que nosotros somos los que decidimos por ella. Somos parte de ella, somos hijos de la madre tierra y tenemos una relación continua con el agua, con el sol, con el viento, con nuestras ancestras y nuestros ancestros que no vemos, pero sabemos que están presentes en cada acto que hacemos, sobre todo cuando tenemos un compromiso y una relación muy importante con que es la chacana. La chacana es la cruz andina que representa el calendario agrofestivo. Y todos los pueblos originarios del mundo funcionan en base de un calendario agrofestivo que se manifiesta entre los solsticios y los equinoccios. Y en esos pasos del universo a veces se hace, a veces solamente está. No respetamos los procesos como nos enseña la tierra. Hay momentos que hay que sembrar, hay momentos que hay que cosechar y hay momentos donde la tierra descansa. Y es el momento donde nosotros aprovechamos de hacer otras cosas mientras la tierra descansa. Porque cuando despierta la tierra, que es el 1 de agosto, para nosotros es una linda ceremonia, porque ese día es un cambio de tiempo donde el sol viene de regreso a la tierra y está más abrigado y ella despierta. Y nosotros hacemos ese día una ceremonia importante para recibir con mucho calor, con comidas, con fiestas, con hoja de coca, con licores, con danzas, para darle la bienvenida y comenzar el proceso nuevamente del trabajo de la tierra. Luego vienen los carnavales. Y en los carnavales es donde se agradece la cosecha. Bailamos y honramos mucho los frutos y también siempre el convivio a la madre tierra. Y así durante el año vamos celebrando de acuerdo al calendario nuestro tiempo, nuestra alimentación y que la madre tierra nos recibe en la vida, nos alimenta y también nos recibe cuando nos vamos a otra vida. Entonces somos seres que tenemos que constantemente estar en reciprocidad, en el aini que le llamamos, la relación entre el humano y la naturaleza, para poder vivir en equilibrio. Y por eso también subimos a nuestras montañas, donde se escuchan nuestros rezos, donde nos conectamos con nuestros sapus y las energías para pedir la venia de un nuevo tiempo y comenzar el próximo año. Agradecer mucho también por este tiempo de que se valora las semillas, que son también un patrimonio importante para la humanidad. Y sin la semilla, sin el agua, son un complemento muy importante. El agua para nosotros, y en especial en uno de los desiertos más áridos del mundo, donde tenemos que competir con otras industrias en nuestro pueblo, es importante hoy en día poder difundir a la humanidad lo importante que es la conservación y la alimentación natural, porque gracias a eso vamos a poder vivir más tiempo, más felices y sin tantas enfermedades. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Rosa, to share with us your feelings, your moment, your culture, your knowledge. Thank you very much, really. Now I wish to give the floor to Betsabe Martinez Gutierrez. Betsabe is Mexican from the indigenous Zapotec community of Santiago Matlajan in the beautiful city named Oaxaca. She has been selected to attend the United Nations Climate Change Conference, and Betsabe was selected along with 11 other young Latin Americans, and she's the only one from Mexico for the scholarship, which consists of being an observer at the Climate Change Conference. Gracias, Betsabe, por estar aquí. Eres muy bienvenida. Te damos el piso.
Hola, buenos días a todos los presentes. Es para mí un gusto estar aquí y compartir con personas con tantos conocimientos que se han dedicado a la defensa de los pueblos indígenas y afrodescendientes, no solo en América Latina, sino también en el mundo. Yo soy una joven indígena perteneciente a una comunidad zapoteca en Oaxaca, México. Soy una mujer que a lo largo de mi vida me he dedicado al empoderamiento de las mujeres, a temas de derechos humanos, y actualmente estoy trabajando con un proyecto que engloba al empoderamiento de las mujeres hacia el tema de la producción del mezcal, que es la comunidad donde yo vengo, hacia convertir el proceso a un proceso sustentable a través de energías limpias. Actualmente formo parte de una organización que es Likes, que es por la que fui seleccionada para estar en este evento, que justo tiene como propósito visibilizar a la juventud indígena y afrodescendiente, a los jóvenes en espacios climáticos internacionales. Creo que los jóvenes en este tipo de espacios tenemos un reto de ser visibilizados, pero como jóvenes indígenas y afrodescendientes tenemos un doble reto. Hoy me siento completamente agradecida con esta organización por permitirnos tener voz en este tipo de espacios, por permitirnos visibilizarnos como jóvenes, para visibilizar nuestras luchas, nuestras comunidades, lo que somos y lo que defendemos. Creo que este tipo de espacios debe justo visibilizar a la juventud indígena. Tenemos que estar comprometidos y también ser visibilizados en la NCQG, que es la nueva meta colectiva de financiamiento climático que se está trabajando y que es un tema central en esta negociación, en esta cumbre climática, y que justo tenemos que tener el acceso directo al financiamiento de las comunidades indígenas, ya que somos las primeras en vivir de forma directa las consecuencias del cambio climático por la estrecha relación que existe a través de la cosmovisión y de nuestra identidad. Justo como comunidades indígenas, a lo largo de los años, como mujeres, a través de nuestros conocimientos, hemos sido protectoras del medio ambiente, en el rol como curanderas, como parteras. Han sido una estrecha relación entre el ambiente, las mujeres, el respeto hacia la biodiversidad. Justo el proyecto que trabajo en mi comunidad tiene como ese tipo de enfoque, que es el empoderamiento de las mujeres a través de una producción de mezcal que actualmente está causando un daño ecológico debido a la industrialización de una bebida ancestral. Las mujeres hoy jugamos un papel fundamental en este proceso, ya que como mujeres hemos salvaguardado y respetado el proceso ancestral del mezcal, y yo creo que en esta ocasión tenemos un segundo reto de no llevarlo a la industria, sino regresar una mirada al pasado para poder regresar y llevarlo a lo que es lo sustentable a través de energías limpias. Y justo este proyecto que estamos trabajando con mujeres en mi comunidad en Santiago Matatlán, asimismo a través de una red de la que formo parte de intérpretes y promotores interculturales, trabajamos temas precisamente de la inclusión de los pueblos indígenas en diferentes espacios a través de la promoción de las lenguas indígenas. Creo que también en este tipo de espacios como jóvenes tenemos una barrera muy grande, que es la barrera lingüística, y que justo quiero reconocer el trabajo de las intérpretes de la organización en la que formo parte, que nos han encaminado y se han preparado con nosotros para poder ser parte de las negociaciones, para que como jóvenes se pueda escuchar nuestra voz en este tipo de espacios, ya que conocemos que existen barreras lingüísticas dentro de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas, en la que solo se reconocen algunos idiomas oficiales y que no se cuenta con interpretación oficial, y que como organización se tiene un doble reto al justo proporcionar la interpretación, preparar a las intérpretes, y que ha sido un proceso muy largo para poder llegar aquí, para que nuestra voz se escuche, para que podamos entender las negociaciones y finalmente para que nos podamos sentir incluidos en este tipo de espacios, que creo que es algo muy importante que las organizaciones deben tomar en cuenta. No solamente estamos aquí para tener una foto, para ser reconocidos en este tipo de espacios, sino también para que nuestra voz se pueda escuchar. Y hoy justo quiero como agradecer a las organizaciones que trabajan en la visibilización de los jóvenes, de los pueblos indígenas, de los pueblos afrodescendientes, porque somos nosotros quienes merecemos estar aquí, somos quienes debemos ser incluidos en este tipo de espacios, somos las comunidades más afectadas, las comunidades vulnerables en el sur global, y que creo que debemos estar muy tomados en cuenta en las negociaciones que se llevan a cabo en esos espacios. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias, Betsabe, por tu testimonio. And to explain also what is it about the mezcal. Mezcal is a traditional drink of Mexico, and as you said, now it has known a new huge commercial campaign, so it's really a huge issue. So thank you to explain that also. And now we are going to give the floor to François Gélineau, who is the Vice-Rector International Affairs and Sustainable Development, responsible for EDI and philanthropy at Laval University since July 2022. He is also professor at the Department of Political Science since 2006, and he is chair in democracy, or was chair in democracy and parliamentary institutions from January 2011 to December 2022. François, we will give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I'm also really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. We started with an example from Chile, then moved on to Mexico, and I'll give you an example from Canada. So we'll cover the whole territory. I have to say, though, that I'm not a member of an indigenous community. I'm here to talk about the experience that we had at Université Laval. Francisca will remember last year we had in a similar panel I described the same program that I'm about to tell you all about, and we had a student of that program that was in the audience who gave her testimony about her experience in this Guardian of the Territory program that I'll talk about in a few minutes. So what I'll do today is I'll give you an example of the inclusion of ancestral knowledge in fighting the climate crisis from a Canadian university perspective. Essentially, maybe to start with the Canadian context, the latest population census in Canada established that the Indigenous population is about 5% of the total population. To put things into perspective, at Université Laval, we have less than 1% of our students that are of Indigenous descent. So we do have a lot of work to do. Throughout Canada, there's about 600 recognized First Nations governments and communities, and a little bit over 10 years ago, the Government of Canada launched a Truth Commission, or Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they published a report in 2015. In this report, we found over 94 calls for action for reconciliation. I could talk about the content of the report, but let's leave it for discussion if anyone has questions. I'll focus more on, before telling you about the program, I'll focus on a few of the barriers that exist to the inclusion of ancestral knowledge in the way we function in universities. There are, of course, structural barriers to the participation of indigenous community in universities. Part of it has to do with access to university per se. The indigenous population has less scholarly preparation in order to attend universities. There are some socioeconomic challenges, and universities are also often located really far away from indigenous communities. And lastly, campuses are rarely well adapted to their needs. There's also the fact that within the non-indigenous population, there's often a lack of knowledge and of the traditions of native peoples, including their language. Although we do in the public school system offer courses, and there's still a lot that has to be done in order to expose non-indigenous people to the reality of native population. Another barrier in universities is that there's no formal recognition of ancestral learning, ancestral knowledge, my apologies. As most of the ancestral knowledge is communicated through oral transmission, it doesn't benefit from the same history that we have in universities, or the way we function. And lastly, there are major funding issues, and philanthropy, at least in our case at Université Laval, has been key to advancing on these issues. So in this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, out of the calls for action, there was an appeal to universities across the country to include in their curriculum more content about ancestral knowledge, and mostly include Native people, not only as students but also as faculty members. In 2022, we received a major grant from the MasterCard Foundation, which allowed us to launch a program that we called In Action with Indigenous People. This is a strategy by which, that was designed by, with, and for Indigenous people. It aimed at increasing the presence of Indigenous people on our campus, both as students, employees, and faculty members. It also aimed at creating a new and more welcoming environment for members of Indigenous communities. We really rapidly designed what we call the Circle of Indigenous People, which is a space dedicated to Indigenous people, so they can feel at home on our campus. They can assemble together and exchange their experiences. We're also working on residence that building that will be exclusively dedicated to Indigenous students and their families. But most importantly, and what I wanted to talk about, was the program that we launched 2 years ago, which is called Guardians of the Territory. It's not a unique program. It also exists in other Canadian universities, and to my knowledge, in some Latin American countries also. I've had examples of it in notably Brazil and Colombia. So the program is designed by, with, and for the members of the Indigenous communities. It's based on a mixture of traditional knowledge and university-level training. So the teachers are both faculty members from the university, regular faculty members, but also elderly from Indigenous communities. The program is designed to train individuals with a holistic understanding of the environment, people that are able to understand the intricacies of their territories through the lens of their communities and through the lens of Western science. So, as I said, the program is based on a mixture of classic university training and field work in a variety of Indigenous communities. We graduated our first cohort last May, and we'll have a new cohort. We have another cohort that is undergoing right now. So it's the Université Laval's commitment has been to try to be more inclusive in order to bring Indigenous knowledge within our curriculum, Indigenous people within our community, and developing, along with them, a new offer of training and research that is better aligned with the priorities of these communities. Thank you.
François, for everything that you have been done as far in the Université Laval. It's look really interesting, and certainly it's the first time that I have heard that such an effort have been done in this kind of university. So before starting with some questions, I wish to open the floor to all the public and ask if someone have some questions for the panelists or not. Quisiera como primero abrir el panel al público y saber si alguien tiene ganas de hacer un comentario o alguna pregunta dentro de la gente que tenemos aquí. ¿Sí?
Thank you. Nayak Sutinach Freddy Sebastian, which in Aymara means my name is Freddy Sebastian. I'm from the Aymara culture. And I have the glad to work at the Atacama Desert next to the Salt Lake of Atacama. And I would like to make 3 commentaries. First, in our language, Aymara, Puri means gold. But in Kumsa, Puri means water. So I was wondering, maybe when Incas just came until the Atacama Desert, maybe they asked the Atacama people, Licanantay, where is the gold? And of course, Licanantay people shows them, this is our gold, the water. So this is something, it is not scientifically understood, but it's something I believe as an indigenous people. On the other hand, last September in Nature Review, there was published criticized to the fact that indigenous people has protected the 80% of biodiversity worldwide. But it's more, the critic is most focused on the procedure, on the methodology. So I would like to ask to this very important panel their opinion about this. Last question is concerning the people in Atacama Desert, and I'm going to do it in Spanish. Estimada Rosa, muchísimas gracias por tu intervención inspiradora, no solo hoy, los otros días también. Yo quisiera hacerte una pregunta por un lado, estamos claros que es necesario conservar, ¿verdad?, la pata Goiri o Pachamama o Madre Tierra en los territorios. Sin embargo, gran parte de las comunidades también están de acuerdo de tener tratos con grandes compañías que están extrayendo minerales como el litio, el cobre, y eso implica también extracción de agua, que es lo más preocupante. Y bueno, si sacamos el agua del medio ambiente, sacamos la biodiversidad. Si sacamos la vida, se pierde la capacidad de la pata Goiri de acumular el agua. Entonces, ¿cómo ves tú la salida entre que algunos quieren que se extraiga y no se extraiga, sobre todo en el contexto de esta COP, en donde probablemente se va a aprobar el artículo 6, el cual regula los mercados de carbono y por lo tanto va a dar una justificación mayor a los gobiernos para que intervengan en nuestros territorios ancestrales? Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Yes, we're going to have the translation of the question because it's really a very interesting question.
Rosa, thank you so much for your inspiring speech. My question is, on the one hand, we have the need to preserve and conserve Mother Earth. But on the other hand, we have large communities that agree to have associations with mining companies that mine for different minerals like lithium, among others. And all of this mining requires water. So without water, we cannot have biodiversity. And without life, then we cannot have the accumulation of water. So I guess my question is, how can we find a solution to this problem, especially in the context of this current COP, where Article 6 will probably be approved, and then governments will have a better justification to interfere in indigenous territories?
Gracias, hermano, por la pregunta.
For the question.
No solamente agregar a tu pregunta, sino
I don't just want to add
complementar también que somos un territorio donde están los minerales críticos.
que nosotros pedimos que se llamen minerales en transición. Creo que los instrumentos que nosotros tenemos como indígenas, como pueblo indígena, más aún estando aquí, se agradece mucho todo lo que uno puede aprender y recibir como herramientas, como instrumentos para poder llegar allá también y alumbrar el camino. Actualmente nuestros hermanos que han cedido es por falta de información. Y nuestra idiosincrasia no es un pueblo de comerciantes. Somos un pueblo que está en un centro donde donde existía mucho comercio, donde había relación con otros hermanos, habían otras lenguas. Por tanto, se cree siempre en la buena fe. La solución son las políticas. Primero por el agua, porque hay una parte de este gran elemento que el Estado de Chile no reconoce como agua, que es la salmuera, que es la que tiene el litio. Y entonces tenemos que hacer un trabajo como pueblo indígena y presionar para que tengamos el consentimiento, y no solamente la consulta, y tampoco una consulta segmentada a quienes podrían aprobar las consultas. Otra cosa también, se vulneran nuestros derechos por el hecho de que no hemos sido por historia un pueblo millonario en este mercado, ¿no? Somos muy ricos en minerales, en cultura, en una belleza paisajística. Tenemos uno de los observatorios más altos del mundo. Entonces, claramente somos un lugar que Chile incluso se siente orgulloso cuando sale, ¿no? Por todas las bellezas del mar, de todo lo que tenemos. Pero aquí el tema son las políticas, las leyes que nosotros como pueblo indígena tenemos que insistir que se modifiquen, como el Código de Agua. Si el Código de Agua cambia y se reconoce la salmuera como agua, hay otra forma también de poder hacer presión, de que se inscriban y se reconozca el patrimonio genético, que son los extrobatolitos, los extremófilos, que viven por millones de años, que cuando se origina la vida. O sea, son antecedentes muy importantes que las políticas tienen que reconocer la ciencia y la sabiduría indígena como algo relevante para este nuevo cambio y esta transición energética que existe. Y por otro lado, si bien el convenio 169 permite las negociaciones, también pido esa sabiduría para mis hermanos, para que puedan realmente estar en una mirada de el mismo nivel y ser parte de la cadena de valores y no meros cobradores de impuestos, por así decirlo. Entonces, en esta COP justamente que se discuten las finanzas y que muchos de los hermanos vienen a pedir que se le reconozca parte de sus derechos, porque la gran mayoría de estos minerales que son parte de la transición energética están en territorios rurales o indígenas. Y ha sido muy poco ese reconocimiento, donde tenemos precisamente que competir con espacios, con el agua, respirar la contaminación, y las compensaciones son muy en desequilibrio. Y por otro lado también las discusiones deben ser de manera global del pueblo indígena y no de grupos. Y que si existen grupos también que puedan ayudar a todo el pueblo, porque la madre tierra no hace diferencia. Somos todos hijos de la madre tierra. Eso, gracias.
Thank you.
I don't know if someone else wants to answer. Yes, Solange?
I would like to respond to the question around the 80% controversy. I think the main question that we all should be asking is who owns the land? Who owns the forest? Who owns the carbon? Who owns the water? And what we know is we have the state or government that legally claim that they own most of it. But what we know also, when you take from a legitimacy standpoint, indigenous peoples, local community, and Afro-descent have been living in those territories, managing the forest for centuries, if not like millennials, and they have been doing it, so they have been owning it. So I think there is this colonial perspective around legally owned and what people really own from their own standpoint. And just taking the land aspect, we know that indigenous peoples and local community only own 11% of their land. The rest is legally owned by our government and the private sector. And here the question should not be around the scientific methodology, but mainly how do we switch the narrative? How do we move to go to doing indigenous-led research? Because over there you will see that there is ownership of the data. The way the indigenous people relate to their territories, the way they can interpret their territories from their own perspective, I think that's what really matters. And that's how we need to switch, moving away from Western ways of doing research. Not saying that it's bad, no. But when it comes to around indigenous knowledge and territories and what we're talking about, cultural heritage, we need to start really promoting locally led research and research data owned by indigenous people. Then that way we can know this is how they perceive it. But if we start going from, the methodology and so on, then we get lost.
Yes, I want to go with you or Betznabe. Betznabe, no sé si te tradujeron lo que acaba de mencionar Solange. Solange hacía referencia a que hay que cambiar la mirada bajo la cual en el fondo se analiza la ciencia y que de alguna manera habría que ir a buscar desarrollo científico en las tradiciones territoriales de los pueblos originarios, de sus saberes. A propósito del comentario que hacía el otro compañero de si en el fondo de esta polémica de que había que el 80% de los territorios está en manos de pueblos originarios y que en el fondo son ellos los que hacen el 80% de la conservación, ¿o no?
Claro, yo creo que justo lo que han mencionado aquí las feministas, y también lo vuelvo como a reiterar, los pueblos indígenas siempre han tenido como una cosmovisión que han salvaguardado de generación en generación, un conocimiento que tenemos desde nuestras ancestras y que yo creo que ha sido como un conocimiento que desde años atrás, si regresamos como una mirada al pasado, ha sido como un tema de salvaguardar el medio ambiente de acuerdo a nuestras creencias, a nuestras costumbres, dado que en los pueblos indígenas existen creencias y costumbres muy arraigadas en las que se tiene como el tema de la conservación del medio ambiente, del respeto de los procesos y de que las mujeres juegan un papel fundamental en ese proceso de salvaguardar, de ser quienes han respetado como este tipo de procesos en la naturaleza. Y respecto al comentario justo de que los pueblos indígenas pues siempre han estado como en estos espacios de tener pues son quienes son como los guardianes, los dueños de la biodiversidad, de los bosques, de las selvas en el mundo. Sin embargo, debido a lo que actualmente está pasando, las comunidades se enfrentan directamente a la lucha contra la crisis climática. Y sin embargo, bueno, ha sido como un tema también de política, de gobiernos, de economía, que ha sido como un tema muy extenso en este tipo de lo que es la importancia de los pueblos indígenas en el medio ambiente.
Thank you very much, Betznabe. I have a last question for all of you. How can we improve the integration of indigenous knowledge? I'm not saying the political participation because we already have the convention, but it's not enough or it's not properly working. So how could we integrate really the knowledge? You mentioned, François, what you have been done at university. What can be improved considering what we have here in this panel? En español, traducimos la pregunta.
Yes, I wanted to ask about how we can integrate this knowledge. No sé si ya la entendieron igual, porque a Betsabet ya le traduje.
Perdón.
I think it's really interesting, and I don't think it's a zero-sum game. It's not either or. We can work together, and I think there are examples of that. The Guardians of the Territory that I talked about is a good example, but there are others. The University of Estadual de Sao Paulo in Brazil works with native people, for example, to do a geographical survey of their land, and they're actually doing it with the Western science side of it at the same time as they're working with the communities. So it's like a two-layer project. I think we need to combine our efforts. On your first comment about the 80%, I think we need to recognize that the ability to find the right balance between what has to be done and how to exploit the land is in the hands of native people. I mean, and again, it doesn't mean that we can't extract resources from the ground, but we need to do it respectfully. And I don't think that non-indigenous people have the capacity alone to do it. So we need to do it jointly. And it's all about land ownership. I totally agree. It's a major issue. And we need to resolve this, because after all, I mean, we're all going to suffer from the consequences of overexploiting our lands. It's not just an issue of preserving one community or another. It's preserving the global community.
So wants to answer? Otherwise, we have another question there. Francisca, ¿quieres intervenir?
También quería aportar algo que creo que también sirve, todo sirve en este momento para que podamos encaminarnos y buscar esa sinergia y ese complemento que necesitamos entre todos. Yo llevo 22 años trabajando en un territorio y tampoco ha sido fácil trabajar en el territorio. Entonces también ahí hay un llamado también a los indígenas también de que nos den la posibilidad, que nos den la oportunidad, que yo entiendo que hay un problema de confianza, se han roto las confianzas, se entiende sobre todo en Sudamérica, es decir, con la colonización, eso es súper entendible, pero necesitamos recuperar la confianza para que podamos también trabajar en conjunto. Si no hay confianza, no vamos a poder avanzar. Yo siento que todavía está eso ahí. Ahora, discrepo yo algo personal, porque yo también me siento hija de la tierra, yo también me siento mujer, no sé, bueno, de hecho también tengo algo de mestizaje. Soy chilena y también yo soy mestiza, entonces también los chilenos lo que tenemos es que somos todos mestizos también. Entonces cuando a mí me hablan un poco también me siento como fuera. Yo no quiero estar fuera, yo no quiero ser alguien diferente a, y eso es lo que yo siempre discuto, digo, es que no es que sean unos ni los otros, es que somos todos, porque también vemos que para poder solucionar el problema del cambio climático, yo he levantado a los pueblos originarios hace mucho tiempo, los amo, he participado en montones de ceremonias, pero también entiendo como empresario, como persona del mundo, que tenemos que ver cómo se conversa la economía, porque vivimos en un mundo donde existe la economía y cómo regulamos la economía con la naturaleza. Es un gran desafío, no es fácil, no está en la respuesta, tenemos que buscar la respuesta, pero para eso realmente también necesitamos que los pueblos originarios
the indigenous
encuentren
peoples
personas en quien
to
poder confiar,
talk
porque
to
yo
us and
entiendo,
to
lo
find
entiendo, lo
people
sé, yo lo
who
siento
they
en mi
trust, because
corazón.
I feel that in my heart.
Pero necesitamos que también
But
haya
we
una
need them.
contraparte
We
para
need
que realmente en
both sides
conjunto podamos
so that
resolver
together
este
we
tema.
can solve
Yo
this problem.
honro a los pueblos
I
originarios
really
porque sé
honor
que ellos
indigenous
cuidaron
peoples.
su
I know
conocimiento y su
that they
sabiduría
took
con la
care
vida.
of this knowledge with their
Ellos
lives.
guardaron su
They were
conocimiento.
the
¿Por
ones
qué?
keeping
Porque
that knowledge.
antiguamente
Because in the
esos
past,
conocimientos no
that
tenían, por lo
knowledge
tanto hubieron muchas personas que
wasn't
murieron
good to be shared,
con los
so a lot of
conocimientos.
people had to
Entonces
die
los
with
indígenas
that
que hoy
knowledge.
día hay
So
son los que
indigenous peoples
resguardaron por
right now,
miles de
they are
años
the
los
ones keeping that
conocimientos
knowledge
para
for
ahora
1,000 years,
tal vez
so that right
entregarlo
now
a este nuevo
maybe
tiempo.
they can deliver
Entonces nosotros
to
también
this
tenemos
new
que estar en la
reality.
altura
So
de
we
mira.
need to be with
En
them.
altura de mira
We
de
need
entender de que
to
esos
understand
conocimientos
that
han sido
this
resguardados
knowledge
por
has been
milenios
saved for
para
1,000
nosotros,
years
para nuestra
for us,
sobrevivencia,
for our
para el
survival,
planeta.
for the planet.
Y gracias a
So,
ustedes que
thank
bueno
you.
que tenemos aquí personas que son
we
de las
have people
comunidades.
here from the
Ojalá que
communities.
hubiera muchos más paneles
I
sobre este tema,
really want
que pudieran
more
hacer
people
mesas
to
de
be
trabajo
here
de
and
este
be part
tema.
of the panels,
Yo llevo 22
working with
años
these.
en
I've been
trabajando en
working
una
for 22
comunidad.
years
Creo que ha sido
in
la
a community,
formación y la universidad más grande
it
de
was
mi
the biggest
vida.
university for me.
Lo agradezco
I'm really
montones
thankful for
todo
that,
lo que he aprendido,
everything that I
pero
could learn.
también entiendo de que tenemos que
But I
todos poner
understand
igual,
that we
nos tenemos que
all
poner
need
igual
to be
todos
part of this,
y,
and we
de la
should be in
misma
the same.
posición.
We should be in the same
No podemos hacer
position.
la
We
diferenciación. Cuando
can't
yo
make
hago
the
una
difference,
diferenciación,
because
yo
when
soy,
you make the
tú no
difference
eres,
and you
yo
say
soy,
you
tú no
are,
eres,
I'm not,
murió.
I am, you're not,
Somos todos, nos tenemos
that's
que
it. We
conectar
need to be connected.
desde ese
We
ser que
need to
somos,
connect
sin
from who
poner
we are
límites. Los
without limits,
límites son los que nos
because those
fragmentan.
limits are
Yo apelo, ojalá que
what's fragmenting
encontremos buenas
us.
personas
So I really hope
para que
that we can
puedan ayudar a
find
los
good
pueblos
people to
originarios.
help us.
I would like to add 2 points here around how do we preserve the traditional knowledge. And I think it has to start first by recognizing and respecting the rights of indigenous peoples, local community, Afro-descendant. Because once rights are respected, it comes with respecting all it comes with, like traditional knowledge, cultural heritage. Another aspect that we have not been talking about here is the youth. We need to think about intergenerational transmission of knowledge. How do we make sure that youth respect the elders within the communities so they can learn from them? How do we make sure that also youth can have access to land and resources and avoid migration? What we are seeing in many local communities or indigenous communities, youth are leaving their territories to the cities or to go abroad because they don't have much, they don't have employment, they don't have access to resources. Then the more we provide or respect the right of youth and give them really access to their land and resources, that will help them stay in their territories and be the next generation to transmit that knowledge. If we don't do that, they migrate, then we lose the knowledge. So how do we really think about all of that?
Thank you very much. That's really interesting. We have a question there and another there.
Thank you very much for providing me the opportunity. This is Bidhan Chandropal. I am representing Bangladesh, and my organization Prabha Aurora, we are a climate sensitive, youth focused, socially committed enterprise working all over the country. And under GEP, Greening Education Partnership, we have been working with Foundation for Environmental Education to run several environmental education programs, not just in other parts of our country, but also in the indigenous and disadvantaged communities in Bangladesh. And in the hilly tracts area, especially in the indigenous community, at where we have been working so far, we have seen that they have really their inherent power that they have, it just not can change their lifestyle, their surroundings, but also change the whole world. Even we have seen that the question asked by him, actually we have identified plenty of trees which can give you water at where there is no water. We have identified trees which can save you from different disasters, and even this kind of solutions we have. But my burning question is, now we need climate science-based implementation research. The point that you have mentioned, I admire all your points, but we need implementation research at where science is involved. Like we have identified trees which can absorb heat, but we are not calculating the rate, how much a particular tree can absorb heat. We need to need evidence, this kind of evidence, so that we can replicate this idea to other parts of our country and other parts of the rest of the world. And these are my questions. How can we get this kind of ideas and can design implementation research, not just in Brazil, but also replicate it in our country at where we need support desperately. And we are looking forward to working together with different organizations, especially we need technical support. We have the knowledge, but we don't have any technical support to know the science of it. So we have identified plenty of indigenous local trees which can save our indoor environment better. But we cannot promote it because we don't identify a particular tree which has a particular calculation of carbon emission saving. So this kind of research are very much necessary nowadays. So how can we do this, and at where we can get support?
So
thank you very much.
We are going to give you the floor, but this question could be answered maybe by you after, and François, because this is more for the scientific area, except if the rest want to answer. And please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the comments, everyone. I have three questions and comments. The first one really is how indigenous peoples are not from the past. Indigenous peoples obviously are here living, and not just living, but really producing science, climate science. And this session here with our fellow mountain sister, that's such a good example. And so how do we then bring that conversation, that expertise into the IPCC is what I'm interested in hearing from you. The second point is then very specific to the IPCC, right? So working group 1, 2, and 3. What we heard from our expert mountain woman fellow sister is what she's been observing and what she knows about where she's from, and how do we then give platform to her experience within the IPCC working group 1, 2, and 3 in the next assessment cycle. I think that is an important question that we need to be talking about. And this leads me to then the third question, which is more directed to the IPCC and the organizers. So it's really good to see that there is a series of events organized today focusing on indigenous knowledge and indigenous peoples' knowledge and indigenous peoples. But what I'm really interested in is to see how the IPCC itself is doing, what it's doing to make sure that indigenous participation is meaningful and convenient and comfortable for the indigenous peoples. So for example, at this session, I see that we have people with different language capacities, but we don't have the translation capacity here at this pavilion, which actually limits my understanding, my ability to understand our speakers properly. And so that also, for me, reflects what IPCC is doing in terms of, or not doing in terms of making sure that capacity is built and also technologies are provided to support meaningful indigenous participation. So in my case, from the way I see it, we have a lot of experts on the panel today, and our indigenous experts, indigenous knowledge holders on the panel. How do we make sure that their voices and experiences are heard, not just as stories or case studies to validate science, but actually they themselves are scientific enough for us to be listening to carefully and meaningfully? So that's my comment.
I don't know if you want to start
Yes,
with the answer.
Thank you very much. I could say thank you again. I have learned a lot. I mean, as always happens with this kind of events. And with regard to this last question, I would like to make or try to make a contribution. Firstly, with regard to what has been said in terms of contributions and from indigenous knowledge with regard to some kind of responses that could be relevant for in responding to climate crisis and also in responding to biodiversity loss. I could say that, as I said at the very beginning, in many cases local knowledge has mainly a local perspective. Indigenous knowledge has mainly a local perspective, taking into account that in many cases the intention of this generated knowledge is not necessarily to be validated outside this place, but however this knowledge is very relevant at the global level, because all what has been said here in terms of the role or the critical role of this wisdom in the context of looking for solutions globally to the climate change crisis and also to biodiversity loss. So I could say that indeed the one possibility that I already mentioned, probably too fast at the very beginning, but later was already taken by other colleagues, has to do with potential partnerships. Potential partnership that could be encouraged. There are a concrete experience here, but could be other that could help in this connection, in reducing this distance, because all spatial scale are critical. Local scale is critical because it's where most of the impacts are felt and where the community live when they have their cultural heritage and so on, but also, of course, regional and global, and the expression of that at the regional and global level. And in looking for global solutions, also this contribution could be, and partnerships can help in that direction. With regard to the last question, as I said before, in the IPCC, the current leadership is in this process of being much more proactive in incorporating or in being much more inclusive, not only with regard to the indigenous knowledge, but also with regard to the gender perspective, with regard to social sciences, with regard to local communities. That means, of course, improve and increase participation. There are different ways, in principle, the traditional ways of participating in the context of the IPCC. One is the observer organizations. Unfortunately, up to now, we have very few, probably only one observer organization representing indigenous people, but this is a way of being directly participating or directly connected to the IPCC, because observer organizations even have the possibility of nominating authors for the report, and this is an entry point. Nomination is not sufficient, of course, but it's necessary to be part of the roster of experts to be selected as member, or as author of the IPCC, but also the observer organization have on first hand all the information because they have voice in the IPCC, even in the IPCC plenaries, even in the IPCC approval processes. There is another channel that has to do with the review processes. The IPCC has 2 rounds of review of reviews of the draft during the assessment process, and their experts, which is very relatively easy to be expert, being demonstrated their capacities, can provide comments, and those comments are addressed by the authors, and at the end of the process, both comments and answers are published after the report is published. So this is a transparent process in which experts, of course also including experts from indigenous and local community, can participate and even suggest additional literature that has not been taken care of and they consider could be relevant for the assessment of the IPCC. This is not all, of course. I would say that still the IPCC has already considered this aspect in the context of the previous assessment, as you mentioned, and I'm going to refer to that later in the second segment. But even in my view, there is a lot of things to be done yet. There is a lot of, even I could say that IPBES has been much more proactive, being a younger organization than the IPCC. Of course, this connection between the biodiversity and indigenous people is crucial, as has been already said by my colleagues. But again, we are still exploring new ways and options for increasing in practice this participation. But I mentioned already some of the traditional ways that could be much more used, much more explored by the indigenous people. So the intention is this one, to be much more inclusive, not only, as I said, for indigenous people, but in general to be much more inclusive. And the point is to be proactive from the both sides. I mean, because this is, in talking about this, answering some of the previous questions, I could say that mutual understanding is critical. Mutual understanding from indigenous people and non-indigenous people, of course, without forgetting history, but mutual understanding is critical. Equitable treatment, informed consent, as has been already said, sharing benefits in the case of the project that has been already mentioned. But I would say that in looking for solution to this global challenge, this knowledge is critical, and I mean, I stand behind this idea, and of course support this intention of the IPCC to be much more proactive in this sense.
Thank you very much. And last intervention with François.
Very shortly, in his introductory remarks, we had the chairman of IPCC earlier, and he talked about interdisciplinarity, and I think that's a key concept. I would maybe broaden its definition by saying we need to approach these problems in multiple with a multiplicity of perspectives, and so that multidisciplinarity would involve, an engineer with like an historian. Multiple perspective would, in my mind, involve looking at a problem through the lens of the indigenous population as well as the scientifics. And we need to work in partnerships. And to answer the gentleman's question, I'd say what you're describing is a fantastic university-level project or researcher project. I mean, you're looking at communities that know how to harvest the forest, they know how to preserve the species, and they're asking themselves one question. If I want to maximize the carbon absorption of my forest, which essence should I keep and should I harvest the most? Well, this is a scientific question. I mean, if I was in forest research and I had a call from a community asking me that question, I would go right away and we would work together. So I think that's the way we have to go. So I think the IPCC is in the right directions.
Of you, it has been a great panel. Unfortunately, we need to stop because another panel is going to come, but it was certainly the best way to start this day about all the panels about youth, gender empowerment, education, and climate change. And as Francisca said, the book about ancestral experience in climate change is going to be available for all of you. So thank you very much. Un aplauso for everyone, and we are going to take the group out picture.
Kia ora and warm Pacific greetings. Thank you for inviting me to make some opening comments